What happens when the world's most powerful currency becomes disposable? Not worthless, just replaceable. The US dollar, once the untouchable king of global trade, is now quietly being ghosted by its ex-allies. Why? Because countries are stocking up on gold like it's the 1970s and shaking hands with BRICS like it's the future. Saudi Arabia says, maybe we'll trade oil in yuan. Brazil, making deals in reals and yuan. And guess what? Even France, yes, NATO France, just did a gas deal with China in yuan. So is the dollar doomed? Or is this just another hype cycle? Let's peel back the layers, because what's happening isn't just economic, it's political, psychological, and maybe even irreversible. They called it a currency, but it was never just that. The US dollar didn't just buy things, it bought influence, bought obedience, bought the illusion of stability, with a bald eagle stamped on top. After World War II, when the world was in ruins, America offered a deal: trust the dollar, and we'll keep things stable. Enter the Bretton Woods system, where 44 countries basically handed the steering wheel to Washington. Not because they loved the states, but because they had no choice. Then came the petrodollar, another masterstroke. Oil, the lifeblood of the modern world, was priced in dollars, not because it made sense, but because it made power. Every nation that needed fuel now needed green paper from a printing press in DC. It wasn't a currency, it was a throne. Nations bent the knee, not to democracy, not to capitalism, but to the almighty dollar. And for a while, that throne looked unshakable. But here's the part no one likes to talk about. When one country controls the global money tap, the rest of the world starts to simmer. Resentment grows, quietly, patiently. Behind boardroom smiles and diplomatic dinners, there's a question everyone whispers: why do they get to rule the rules? The answer, of course, is power. But power never lasts forever, and the cracks, they've already started to show. Because when an empire is built on paper, what happens when people stop believing in the ink? While Washington was busy printing dollars and patting itself on the back, a group of so-called developing countries were taking notes, quietly, patiently. And now, they're done playing by someone else's rules. Enter BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, once dismissed as the economic B team. Emerging markets, they said, as if they were just warming up for the real game. Well, guess what? They're not just emerging anymore. They're converging. Together, they make up over 40% of the world's population. They control massive energy reserves, manufacturing giants, rare earth metals, and yes, nuclear weapons. Think of them as the revenge of the nerds, except these nerds own oil fields, control ports, and can wipe out your financial system before lunch. And they're sick of the dollar, sick of US sanctions that act like economic handcuffs, sick of getting kicked out of SWIFT, the global payments network, like naughty kids at a private club, sick of needing permission slips just to trade. So they're building their own playground, a BRICS bank, a new reserve currency, even their own messaging and payment systems. The goal: de-dollarize the planet and break free from the green grip that's choked global finance for decades. It's not just rebellion, it's retaliation, because when you've been sidelined long enough, you don't ask for a seat at the table, you flip the table over. It's 2025, not 1825, and yet guess what central banks are scrambling to buy? Gold, not stocks, not crypto, not even dollars. Good old-fashioned shiny metal pulled out of the earth, like it's Y2K and everyone's prepping for financial doomsday. Why? Because gold doesn't come with strings attached. It can't be frozen by Washington. It doesn't care about SWIFT codes or sanctions. And unlike the dollar, it doesn't magically lose value every time the Fed gets the urge to stimulate the economy. Let's be real. While the US was printing trillions like it was Monopoly night, other countries were watching, horrified. They realized something. This global reserve currency could be diluted at will. One press conference, and boom, your savings, worth less. Your trade surplus, devalued. So they turned to the one asset that doesn't play politics. Russia's been stacking gold. China's hoarding like it's going out of style. Even smaller economies, from Turkey to Uzbekistan, are quietly converting dollars into bullion. Not for decoration, but for survival. Because here's the truth: gold doesn't default. Gold doesn't do bailouts. Gold doesn't need permission. And when trust in Uncle Sam's money printer runs dry, gold becomes the backup generator. No headlines, no tweets, just vaults filling up, quietly, as the world prepares for a currency storm. America thought it was sending a message to Russia. Instead, it sent a wake-up call to the entire world. When the US froze Russia's $300 billion in reserves, blocked its SWIFT access, and slammed down sanctions like a courtroom gavel, It wasn't just punishing Putin. It was broadcasting one very loud, very clear warning. Your money isn't really yours if it's in dollars. Suddenly, countries everywhere started sweating. If the US could do that to Russia, a G20 nation with nukes and oil, what could they do to the rest of us? What happens if we step out of line, vote the wrong way, make the wrong deal? That fear did what decades of diplomacy never could. It united the dollar's biggest users against it. Even allies, quietly, nervously, began looking for the exits, diversifying reserves, signing bilateral trade deals, swapping greenbacks for yuan, rupees, and yes, gold. Because once trust is broken, there's no going back. The irony: the dollar was supposed to isolate America's enemies. Instead, it alienated its friends. Weaponizing a currency might win the battle, but it can lose the war. Because now, the world isn't asking if they should escape the dollar. They're asking how fast. It wasn't Russia. It wasn't Iran. It was France, one of America's oldest allies, a NATO heavyweight, buying liquid natural gas from China and paying in yuan, not euros, not dollars, yuan. On paper, it was just a simple energy transaction, but in reality, it was a seismic tremor under the foundations of the dollar's global dominance. Because this wasn't BRICS throwing shade, this wasn't some sanctioned country looking for loopholes. This was a Western power, a trusted member of the dollar club, experimenting with a different currency, on purpose, and Wall Street heard it loud and clear. This wasn't rebellion, it was something more dangerous. Curiosity. If France can do it, what stops Germany, Japan, Saudi Arabia? Because when even your friends start checking out the exit door, the room gets very quiet, very fast. This is how empires don't fall, they erode. One trade deal at a time, one payment at a time, one dollarless transaction at a time. No fireworks, no announcements, just slow, quiet abandonment. The dollar isn't collapsing overnight, but the loyalty, that's leaking. If France dabbling in yuan sent shivers through Wall Street, Saudi Arabia picking up the phone for China, that's a full-blown panic attack in Washington. Because let's get one thing straight, the entire petrodollar system, the backbone of American financial dominance, is built on one sacred rule: oil gets sold in dollars, period. And who made that rule holy? Saudi Arabia. So when Riyadh starts cozying up to Beijing, discussing oil trades in yuan, it's not just awkward, it's sacrilegious. That's the Vatican questioning Jesus. That's Apple ditching iPhones. This isn't just about energy, it's about global demand for the dollar. For decades, countries needed dollars just to keep the lights on, to buy oil. That demand, it created an artificial floor under the dollar, a built-in advantage, a cheat code. But if oil suddenly comes in multiple currencies, that floor disappears. The US loses leverage, the dollar loses muscle, and countries start asking, wait, why are we playing by their rules again? It's not a divorce yet, but Saudi Arabia is definitely flirting. And the dollar, it's looking real jealous, and a little desperate. America hits print on a few $1 trillion, and the rest of the world gets the bill. Welcome to the magic trick of modern finance. The US floods the system with cheap money, zero interest rates, pandemic stimulus, endless bailouts, and when inflation explodes, it slams on the brakes. The Fed hikes rates at record speed, and guess who chokes? Not Wall Street, not the Hamptons, emerging economies. The moment rates rise in the US, money flees from poorer nations like rats off a sinking ship. Currencies collapse, debt balloons, food and fuel prices spike. Why? Because Uncle Sam had a spending problem. And here's the kicker: those countries didn't even get the party. They just woke up with the hangover. America prints, the world pays. Nice deal if you're the printer, but for the rest of the globe, it feels less like a stable system and more like a hostage situation. This isn't just economics anymore, it's psychological, a slow-building trauma of being yoked to a currency that can wreck your economy overnight. Not through war, not through invasion, just policy tweaks from a guy in a suit. The dollar isn't just unreliable, it's dangerous, and countries are done pretending it's their friend. So now, BRICS wants their own currency, a shared coin, maybe backed by gold, maybe by oil, maybe just by collective frustration. It sounds bold, dramatic, headlines love it. The dollar's replacement? Not quite. Let's be honest, getting Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa to agree on lunch is hard enough. Now imagine them building a fully unified financial system. Shared central bank, standardized policies? Good luck. The infrastructure isn't there. The trust isn't there. The track record? Definitely not there. But here's the twist: it doesn't have to work. The real threat isn't the BRICS currency itself, it's what it represents. A jailbreak mentality. A growing chorus saying we've had enough of the dollar. And that chorus? It's getting louder. Because even if this BRICS coin ends up being geopolitical cosplay, a flashy costume with no substance, the desire behind it is real. The intent is damaging enough. Every speech, every summit,
Every gold-backed whisper chips away at the illusion of dollar permanence, and illusions don't shatter all at once. They crack, then crumble. So real threat or not, the US isn't just fighting a currency, it's fighting an idea that the world doesn't need it anymore. This isn't some Hollywood disaster scene where the dollar bursts into flames overnight. No headlines screaming "breaking dollar dead." No chaos in the streets. It's quieter than that. More subtle. Like a couple that stops fighting and just starts sleeping in separate rooms. First it was small oil deals, then bilateral trade in local currencies, then central banks trimming their dollar reserves. Just a little, just in case. No one's storming out. They're just packing slowly, filing the papers. This is de-dollarization. Not a crash, but a calculated exit. One trade deal here, one yuan payment there, and suddenly, a trillion-dollar question looms. Who still wants to use dollars in 10 years? Because it's not just about utility anymore. It's about trust, and trust doesn't explode. It erodes. One headline, one sanction, one alternative at a time. By the time you feel it, it's already too late. That's the real danger. Not a bang, but a whisper. Not collapse, but irrelevance. And the most powerful currency in the world might just be quietly written out of the script. So what does all this mean for you? It's not just about BRICS summits or petrodollar politics. This isn't some abstract chess game played in marble halls. It's your savings, your rent, your grocery bill. Because if the dollar loses its grip, even gradually, the ripple hits everything. Inflation? It doesn't stay in textbooks. It hits your fridge. Investment stability? Shaken. Your retirement plan? Suddenly built on sand instead of stone. The US has been playing a high-stakes game, printing money like it's Monopoly, assuming the world has to keep playing along. But what happens when the rest of the table stands up and walks away? You see, America's greatest weapon was never just its military. It was the dollar. Trusted, ubiquitous, unquestioned. Now, that blind trust is cracking. And when trust cracks, power follows. This isn't just an economic shift. It's a geopolitical tremor, one that could rewrite the global pecking order. So here's the real question. If the dollar stops being the world's anchor, what takes its place? Gold? Yuan? Chaos? No one knows for sure. But one thing's clear. The era of unquestioned dollar dominance is ending. And the next chapter? It's already being written. Deal by deal. Brick by brick. BRIC.